next one. And if you're going out, just come back very quickly because it's going to be the next one, very, very interesting on why startups should really be excited about generative AI. And as we have seen in this session, the power of AI, a lot of people are saying that in the next 10 years, either people, companies, two type of companies will be staying in the market. One who embrace this AI and one who are out of business. So I think this is going to be a very, very important and interesting conversation. So let me welcome Mr. Anurag Sahay. Anurag has over past decade, Anurag's professional journey has centered around building and steering proficient data science teams that can deliver data science and machine learning solutions. His journey on this topic started with the development of AI-powered machine vision products designed for eye disease diagnosis, a project that we had chance to execute in a startup environment. Subsequently, his focus shifted to devising machine learning strategies for demand forecasting and recommendation systems during his tenure at Big Basket. Currently at Nagarro, he has been instrumental in establishing and managing business units dedicated to data science, big data, and AI. This initiative started from scratch, now successfully drives profitable outcomes. And he's going to talk about the startups should really excited about generative AI, and this session is powered by Nagarro. We thank them for their support on behalf of TAI. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a clicker I can use?
Yes.
And just let me know. Excellent. Can you all hear me? Is the voice clear? Yeah? Okay, great. Thank you. So welcome everybody. Thank you for attending this talk. A very quick introduction. My name is Anurag Sahay. I lead the data science AI business unit at Nagarro. Nagarro is one of the fastest growing product engineering companies. It's a $1 billion+ revenue, about 20,000 people, very global. And as part of this role, being in this role, I get a chance to work with a lot of different enterprises, especially on topics around AI, data science, and data engineering. So very happy to have this conversation with you all. This conversation is motivated by this idea of, well, AI has been around for a while. It's not a new topic. I personally have been working on this topic since 2013. What has changed in the last couple of years? That's one. And two, where is value going to accrue in this change as this happens? So that's the motivation behind this talk that I would want to share with you. So if you look at AI investments and value accrual that has happened, a lot of AI was being built by companies like Google, Meta, Microsoft, and big companies, the FANG companies, so to speak. And they have been creating a lot of value in the software systems that they have been building, in the way they have been selling cloud services, and so forth. So this has obviously been happening. The interesting question here is that, do you know of very interesting startups that have succeeded in this period pre-generative AI phase? And there are not many names that come to mind. Most of the value accrual has happened in the enterprise space, in the big FANG company space, until generative AI has come about at some level. Now, in the last few years, since Gen AI has come up, there are some new names on the horizon. OpenAI, obviously, Midjourney, and a host of other companies, Hugging Face, and they're obviously doing different things in different spaces. There are model hubs that are coming together. There are obviously value propositions, whether it's generative content and so forth. There is an interesting shift in this process, and what we want to do is analyze why this is happening. And this hopefully will give us some insight into how we want to approach a topic like Gen AI, generally speaking, especially if you're a startup, and what should you be thinking if such is the case. So if you look at the industry pundits, right, and everybody's commentary on Gen AI, people are comparing Gen AI revolution very closely with the way the microchip and the impacts of microchip revolution that happened, in the way internet was created, and they think that it's an equally important platform that is coming together that is going to change the way we do business, that's going to change the way consumers behave, and so forth. If you look at performance of how these things are coming up, if you look at the speed of adoption and the speed of innovation, there is definitely a lot of promise in this claim. But still, it really requires us to go and analyze a little bit more deeply about what's different this time versus what has been happening in AI anyways. So one of the important things that you can think about is, right, if you think about the way we used to sell AI pre-generative, before the generative AI revolution came about, I would personally be in these conversations and we'd be talking to stakeholders, and the questions that would come up after we have positioned an AI model or an AI service would be, how accurate is your model? Accuracy was a big question a lot of people would ask, 80%, 85%. And then the questions would come to, okay, what will it take for it to be 90%, 95%? It's a very standard question we used to encounter a lot in our conversations. The interesting problem is, to build an AI model which is 80% accurate, let's say if it costs $1 million. But if you were to take that model and you wanted to make it 90% accurate, it's not going to be like another $1 million. It might be 5 times that $1 million. The speed at which, or the cost that is required to scale a model accuracy to the next quanta is significantly nonlinear. And this is important because suddenly you are, as a model developer, in a situation where you have a reasonably good model, but it cannot take care of all the edge cases. And so, as a company, I have to package it differently. I have to find ways. You obviously can't deploy a model which is only partly accurate and hope that you would achieve a very significant business outcome from a situation like this. So this is a challenge at some level. So I've already talked about nonlinearly, right? Now the cost is that if you're going to package it in a way where people are going to be part of that solution, you have to have people or human in the loop as a step or as an idea to be able to build and make that model deployable. So your total cost as a company to deploy a model like this is the cost of the AI model plus the cost of people that it is going to take to be able to make that relevant in production. Now this is an upfront cost for a company, and they have to figure out if this is going to make sense economically or not. The other important thing, right, correctness. If your model is right 80% of the time or 90% of the time, what is going to happen when the model is wrong? Like, are you really okay if your model reads a check? Let's say it's an OCR model. It reads a check and reads the account on the check wrongly one time in 100 times. Is that okay? Or you have a customer-facing bot which advises wrongly one customer in 1,000. Is that okay? Obviously not. And these are very important situations that enterprises have to think about when they're deploying AI models. So when it comes to this, again, correctness, it seems like that the way to solve that problem is you have to have people in those situations. You cannot avoid this people situation. And so traditional AI has been grappling with this situation and trying to figure out how to really solve this unit economic problem at some level. So the questions obviously are, in a company, in a situation when if you're a business and you're trying to push AI out there, do you really have a value proposition for an enterprise to adopt it? And you can see clearly that AI adoption has been sputtering. It has, before the generative era, AI adoption was not that successful. We have been trying a lot, but data science adoption has been more successful in enterprises rather than anywhere else. And so if you're a startup and you have a business value proposition, you are grappling with these two scenarios, edge cases and correctness. Now let's look at what is really the problem here. The problem is that AI is really competing with something else, and that's basically a human being. Think about a person, right? A human being who has as a being been evolving for the last 100,000 years. They have become really good at perception tasks. They really do these perception tasks very, very well. They've also been very good at thinking skills, and in a lot of ways when it comes to body dexterity. So these are fairly significant capabilities that human beings have evolved to at some level. And interestingly, they work when human beings are working at these levels, they're consuming very little energy compared to what a GPU would be consuming at some level. We're talking 150 watts of energy that runs over a bowl of porridge or a bowl of khichdi or a future parties. That's the kind of energy intake that a human being has. And these people, as in we people, are really comfortable working with edge scenarios. You put me in a traffic jam in a car, and I would be able to navigate that if I'm a reasonably good driver. I would be able to handle those edge cases fairly well. And I have this capability to deal with context, right? Context is a super idea here. People, given a certain context, can solve that problem way better than any AI model, traditional AI model could. And so what was really happening was that, and of course, the unit economics of how much, so it's not just food, but how much are you paying, right? I mean, a lot of these labor-intensive effort that you look at is about $5 to $15 an hour cost. So if you really were building a business and you had some really tough context, you're probably better off hiring people to solve that problem rather than bring an AI model or an AI plus human combination. The unit economics do not add up very well in such a situation. And so I think the conclusion is at some level, okay, before I go there, there's another interesting thing that, that comes from a situation like this. If you think about an AI company which is trying to build a software or an AI model and trying to sell it to customers, one of the problems they are going to face is that they don't really have, they're trying to fit their AI model into their existing business workflow. It's not like that they are able to change user behavior significantly. And this is very important because the way internet or chips or mobile phones have shifted business from conventional companies to startups is because they have changed user behavior. So the way I interact with the world, if that behavior changes significantly, it allows for disruptors to come into that market. But if you do not change behavior, then it is very difficult to enter that market. All you're trying to do is augment what they're doing in some powerful way and hope that that augmentation is economically advantageous for you. And this is an important point because if you look at traditional platform shifts that have happened, all these platform shifts have changed user behavior, and that has allowed a strong company to come in and take that leverage at some point. So if you look at the autonomous driving market, right, the self-driving cars, so to speak, right, and look at that market at some level, it's a situation where there are several edge cases that are present. Okay, the road's straight, and all you have to do is drive straight. Cruise control has been around. Automatic braking has been around. Those augmentations have already been around. So if I was an AI company and I built a model saying, oh, I have built a self-driving car, that was great, that works great, but the road has to be straight, and the road has to be clear, and it'll do everything. Nobody's going to buy that, right? Because that's not what you're designing for. But this particular problem space poses this challenge that it has got lots of edge scenarios. So you have to, if you have to solve this problem, figure out a way to solve this edge problem. You always had a situation where you required a human being in the leap, so the driver has to be present, the driver has to have their hand on the car at some level before self-driving would work at some fundamental level, right? And what are you competing with? You're competing with a human being who has better developed perception tasks. Like they can see better at some level, they recognize object better, they understand context. If they see a person standing on the edge of the road, they automatically know that this person has the possibility of jumping in front, and they automatically are cautious. This is a very context-oriented problem. And human beings are way better, and they do it at 12 to 15 watts of energy. That's the cost of energy that our perception tasks take compared to a GPU running on an NVIDIA machine on the back of a car, which is consuming about 1,500 watts. That kind of a difference in economics that comes about, right? So while a lot of these things are super important in the AV market, it is still very difficult to justify the economics for something like this. And you have spent so much money, we have spent so much money, close to $75 billion in the self-driving autonomous vehicle market, and it is still, only yesterday, San Francisco allowed, this was news item yesterday or day before, San Francisco has opened up the amount of self-driving cars that are possible, and there was a situation where all these companies like Waymo and others have allowed more vehicles onto the road, and there was a blockage, and it became front page news about, see how self-driving cars are really not ready. And it seems like everybody in the market is really ready to jump, because the standards by which they will evaluate a self-driving vehicle is way harsher, because people are expecting that to actually economically be much more, and in every other way be much better off than what human beings are offering. So it's a tough market, right? So that's the idea. And so people, at some level, AI has been competing with humans at those tasks. And so what is the option for you? If you are an AI company and you're dealing with traditional AI, one is you really position yourself as an AI plus people company. So you figure out what's your gig. I will build an AI model. It'll take care of a lot of scenarios, but for the edge cases, I will have people. And that's how I position myself. Or I position myself saying, oh, this is going to augment a human being. And so the real thing is this will make recommendations, and then the final decision is on the people or the person who's running it. So let me build things like that. And this has been the way Microsoft, Google, Facebook have built something. What they have done is they have augmented software, but left everything still. It's like existing workflows of, this is how we build software, and let's use a lot of AI in the background to really augment software at some level. And there is a failure in changing the way people interact. There is no new behaviors that are emerging from traditional AI approaches. So as a result, the summary is, in our minds, is if you think about it, this is the way I think about why startups have not succeeded very well in traditional AI business. The startup hires human beings to do the tasks. It plans for AI to automate eventually. Initially, the AI handles 80% of the cases, and then the people handle the 20% of cases. Now you have a company which has got lots of people in it, and you're building automation software. It is not efficiency oriented, and now you're going to be stuck in that frame. You're not going to ever be able to come to a place or be able to package it in a manner that you're actually an automation or a truly automation company. So lots of economics here at the background of why traditional AI has not been so successful. But generative AI changes that game. It does change that game. And so if you look at all of those things that I just shared, I'll just quickly walk you over through the generative AI arguments about why those things shift when these topics are coming about. So one of the first things to think about is, what is Gen AI? Gen AI can throw up ideas of Mid-Journey, ChatGPT. These are ideas that come to people's mind. But what is really behind generative AI? And the big idea is foundation models. Foundation models are the crux of what is driving the entire movement to generative AI. And what are foundation models? So foundation models are huge models which consume internet scale data, whether they are text data, it's image data, video data, but they're looking at huge internet scale data that they will learn on. Right? So very vast amounts of data. Then you bring very strong novel architectures like transformer-based architectures running on several thousand GPUs for several months to be able to learn and try one epoch of learning, to be able to take all that and distill that into some common knowledge. But that's not the end, right? It's not like one self-supervised learning will do the trick. You have actually 4 stages of learning. You have self-supervised, then supervised instruction learning, then fine-tuning of that, then RLHF, before you'd actually get a foundation model. But then the interesting thing happens. Once you have a foundation model like that, you can take that foundation model and adapt it very quickly for several tasks. Not one task, not 2 tasks, not 3 tasks. We are talking tens of tasks, hundreds of tasks. Now that's where the value is coming about in the Gen AI space. And Gen AI is not about Mid-Journey coming with real hyper-realistic or photorealistic images, or ChatGPT talking language at that level. It's the foundation model that's sitting at the core, which is the big idea at some level. And what the big idea is, just for re-emphasis, is that the first big idea is you have built a model that you did not train specifically for one task, but that has the ability to do many tasks at any given, very, very quickly. These could be zero-shot learning, few-shot learning, or even fine-tuning. But very quickly, it can adapt itself to new tasks. And the interesting thing is, and this is why also it gets scary,
is that these tasks that it has abilities to do, nobody really knows how do they emerge. So frankly, that's a good part because suddenly the model can develop an ability to learn Persian or do mathematics as you increase the parameter count or the complexity, but it can also do something very harmful. Until you know what you're testing for, you don't even know what abilities these foundation models have developed, and that's the risky part of AI. So it's not all fear mongering. There's actually some genuine fear or unknowns here which we don't know. Emergence is a very powerful idea in foundation models. Now, if you look at this trend of what is happening with foundation models and Gen AI, there's some very useful trends to look at. One is that this time there is actually consumer interest in Gen AI. Unlike traditional AI, there was no consumer interest. This time you actually see consumer interest. The way these apps are getting adopted, this is pretty interesting, pretty significant, right? Lots of different apps making very interesting inroads into the way people are actually consuming and taking there, right? If you look at average monthly users, which is a pretty big number, this is growing rapidly for ChatGPT, and you can sort of sometimes imagine that, oh, this is a novelty factor, it's only been 6 months, 8 months, whatever, but no, this is not novelty anymore. These are sustained monthly activity on these platforms. So there is actually behavior shifting where people are actually developing, and this is coming because models like ChatGPT and GPT-4 have abilities to do multiple tasks. They are not trained for one specific decision making. They can do several things at once, right? And which is what people are leveraging at some level. So there is that. It's not just ChatGPT. Sometimes you dismiss it saying, oh, it's just ChatGPT. Midjourney, big stuff, big adoption here, right? Lots of users, average monthly users going higher. They are introducing premium services and only access through premium services. By the way, lots of people in the world discovered Discord as a service because Midjourney moved to Discord. Until then, people didn't even know what Discord servers were, and we sort of clearly had that experience. So there's some very significant unlocking of potential and platforms also as a result. Character AI, I don't know if you all know Character AI, but it's a company that makes a lot of personality bots. You can have a conversation with Einstein or Elon Musk or whoever, and these are hyper-real conversations with very specific context with these people. You can also create your own character bots and so on. And people are moving to these platforms. The number of people who are actually using these platforms is getting significantly higher. And they have released data recently about what is the sustained activity on a platform every day, and they see activities sustained to about 2 hours in a day. Like people are actually spending 2 hours of their important time in the day on platforms like this. A very big shift in behavior change. Look at developers market. Llama 2 came about a few weeks ago, and the amount of GitHub activity that it has fostered is crazy, significantly dramatic. So again, you can't just take it to like, oh, these are very fancy apps that catch imagination. There's actually significant movement in many different dimensions when it comes to these topics. So the thesis is that there is a very strong argument that generative AI is not only economically viable, but it can fuel levels of market transformation that we haven't seen before, or we have seen it with the microchip and internet. Let's just look at the other parameters that I just talked about, right? Things about correctness is getting redefined. So what does 80%, 20% mean in the case of Gen AI? It means nothing. What it means is, does the content, see when you're talking about generated content, what you're really interested in is that, hey, is this generated content appealing and engaging to the user? That's the big idea. Not like, oh, is it doing it 80% right or 20% right? You have shifted the conversation. When I'm going to sell AI now, I'm not going to sell, oh, this model can only do 80% things and not do the 20% things. What I'm going to talk about is this model really comes up with very appealing and generative and useful content. It can engage your user. It's a shift in how this is getting sold now. So conversations are not about accuracy anymore, as it's about content and so forth, right? It has applicability in a lot of markets. I mean, whether it's gaming, whether it's healthcare, whether it's personal finance. The other gentleman was talking about healthcare and education as important topics. Frankly, it's across the board. Gaming, personal finance is considered, in US, this was a stat, like people are willing to talk about sex and death, but are unwilling to talk about personal money or personal finances. They'd rather have a very private conversation with a bot on their personal finance. And if there was a bot which could actually work with people on how are they allocating money, how are they investing money, what their budget is, whether it's overspilling, I think everybody in this room would love to have a bot like that that can take care of their finances. I would love to have a thing which could actually take care of my bank accounts, my investments, and if it needed rebalancing, could probably just rebalance. Stuff like that, right? So there's lots of different applications of a thing like this in many different markets. And that's different from how it was before, right? The other important thing is that suddenly you're not competing with a person on a task which is where a human being is already very proficient at. You are competing with a human being on a very different task. So human beings, while they know how to perception tasks, can do perception tasks very well, like I can see all the objects in this room and I can navigate very well because I have evolution on my side. If you ask me to write poetry on the spot, I am not going to be that successful. Or if you ask me to write stories on the spot, I'm not going to be that successful. But ChatGPT can. So the goal is not about competing with human beings on the same tasks that human beings are good at, but the conversation is now on language, on creativity, on using content and generate content in ways, tasks where human beings are not that good at, and we have not had so much time to really spend on that, right? And if you have, right, I mean, it takes a PhD to really do a lot of these things and so on, to be able to be very good at these tasks, and you have to pay huge amounts of money to such people. So the idea is that, change the context of the conversation. New user behaviors are emerging. You have people who are looking for coaches, as mentors, as educators, as friends, even lovers. There's a company which is selling that product out there, a startup, right? The kind of conversations, romantic conversations LLMs can have with you are at a completely different level that people can have. And it's a product, and people are happy to come on board on that product. So there is willingness to pay. Again, this is not just like, oh, it has to be in open source so that I can download it and play it on my free time without paying money. People are actually paying money for these things as we go. It's a really important metric in looking at how the market is shifting at some level. So there is actually a lot of traction in the way generative AI is being positioned. Sometimes I use this analogy that traditional AI used to make PhDs, or they would try and make models which were very specialized. And so these models, because so much money has gone in and so much effort has gone in labeling data sets, finding very curated specific data set, and then you want to sell them, your goal is to really make, because it's such a specialized model, you want to get really good performance. Otherwise, it's a failure. I mean, if you have a PhD person and they don't know how to do a specialized task at that PhD level, what's the point in having a PhD person? So instead of arguing about that, Gen AI has said that, okay, you know what, we are not in the business of making PhD level models. We are in the business of making 12th pass level models. And so the conversation is shifted from there to a completely different platform. Now, with a 12th class platform, you will have to train them or fine tune them or use them on several tasks. You can. So if you give me a 12th, a bright student who is a 12th class student has general idea, I can train them to do X, I can train them to do Y, I can train them to do Z, and I'm not expecting the world from them. But if you give me a PhD, I'm going to expect the world from them. So generative AI sort of changes that from traditional AI. It says, okay, we are going to do that instead of this. And suddenly the conversation is shifted. And that, in our minds, is a very powerful platform shift. It's a shift in the way we approach and look at AI. It's a shift in how AI is going to be sold in the coming days. And it's going to get even more interesting between how these platforms are going to be perceived and the dynamics they are going to turn out in the days to come. And this is the big idea of why a startup is potentially now a very interesting stakeholder in this game, because there are these market shifts, market shift in platform and so forth that they can leverage at some level. And you can look at the unit economics, whether it is art creation or legal content, all these creative tasks, AI is way better, about 5 to 6 times better, both in terms of time and in the unit efficiency of economics compared to a person. And that is a powerful shift, again, building this argument about why these shifts are pretty fundamental and significant. So which brings me to the end of what I wanted to basically share, that this is a novel, interesting platform shift opportunity for startups. We expect a lot more startups to come about to actually leverage this shift. The important question is going to be is, do they recognize this platform shift? And can they use this and tap this platform shift in a powerful way? Or are they going to be, and there are several ifs in this question, are they going to be taken over again by the Facebooks and the Meta and the Apples and the Microsoft, and they are going to call the shots? They will take that. A lot of cloud companies have taken that as like, oh, this is AI is traditionally their market. They are going to use Gen AI in a very powerful space. I and personally feel that this is actually slightly different. Startups actually have an opening here, and they can do pretty interesting, novel things to really change that outcome. Thank you so much. I hope this was useful for you. Any questions?
More questions?
Yes, please.
I think obviously at this point of time, generative AI seems to be more adept for creative generation. I mean, which is open to interpretation, right? Like, let's say if I ask Midjourney to give me an image of a dog playing in the park, I'm not really looking at accuracy or correctness. Whereas, picture can be interpreted by different people in different ways. So, seems to be better in that space where it could be interpreted in different ways rather than it being correct factually, like you said, right? So I'm just thinking that maybe, let's say, the hard math, right? Some of those use cases, considering the speed of development, do you think generative AI will also sort of get that correctness or accuracy bit right in the next couple of years? And is that a space one should be looking at, or right now it's better to focus on the creative aspects?
Yeah, that's a good question. And a couple of hot points there, right? First of all, there are some fundamental structural issues with LLMs and how they are designed, that they cannot be good at everything. First of all, these problems of memory. LLMs don't have a perfect memory, just like people. They will never be. Have you read the book, what is that, Daniel Kahneman book, the System 1, System 2 book?
Yeah.
You know about that, right? System 1 and System 2. System 2 is all about deliberate thinking and so on. So while we have skills, naturally we are gifted as people. We know how to do System 1. We look at people very quickly. We know what that is. System 2 requires effort. So the same thing is true of LLMs. LLMs will have to be augmented with patterns like RAG, something called retrieval augmented generation, where you use a lot of context to be able to apply it to an LLM before they will be able to be better at it, right? They are trying different things. For example, LLMs which have been exposed to code, like actual programming code, are way better at reasoning than LLMs which have been trained not on code. And this was an accidental discovery by OpenAI, which later they were like, oh, you know what, if we want our models to be very good at reasoning, we should do this. The problem is they still don't know all the elements of how to make it really as smart in maths, as smart in reasoning, as smart in everything else, right? So it's very hard to say whether they will be good or not. Maybe there is a breakthrough tomorrow and that will be. But the practical way of thinking is that today, if I want my LLM to be good at maths, I should fine tune it on some tasks which are math specific. I should give it context so that I can, and those are very reliable patterns to actually get an outcome, right? So the practical way, if I was a startup and I really wanted to address that, I would not speculate about what the future of LLM might be, but really try and see if I can build this shift. The important thing is, can I use this shift in behavior, this platform shift, to really get a community behind me? And then I can be in that game. That tomorrow, if a new LLM comes, I can, instead of the RAG pattern plus LLM, I can adopt that new LLM and service my customers. The question is taking advantage of this shift that is happening, really, right?
I have another question, if it's okay to ask.
Sure.
Should I pass?
Do we have time?
Yeah. One quick question. I mean, I think you were also saying that will this new epoch also be sort of dominated by the traditional big tech companies, or do startups have a chance?
Have a play,
Yeah, and obviously there are arguments on both sides, right? So I mean, while the cost of compute is coming down, it still looks like, since a lot of these content generation is going to get commoditized, what would really be valuable would be something which are, let's say, taught on something which is high quality data, right? So for example, if ChatGPT were to access what gets discussed on a Quora, the answers are so much better rather than what it's scraping off the internet, right? And things like that. So do you think that because big tech could sort of obviously have a monopoly on one, compute because of the resources they can put in. Number two, in terms of access to these very critical or crucial data sets, right? So do you think that therefore startups have an opening? Because those two seem to be critical resources in this game. Yeah.
So that's again a very interesting question. So if you think about if you look at the total B2B software that used to be the total revenue of the B2B software in 2003, it used to be about $100 billion, the total revenue worth, right? Compare that to 2023, it's about $600 billion. So if you look at that revenue spend, it's the split between infrastructure and applications is about 70-30. 70% of that revenue was being generated by infrastructure companies and 30% was being generated by apps. Today, if you look at the split of the 600 billion pie, the ratio is more around 60-40. So while infrastructure is always a play, and if you look at the AI ecosystem, you'll have three different groups: AI applications, AI models, and AI infrastructure, right? So AI infrastructure is all the cloud providers plus NVIDIA, and NVIDIA is obviously definitely there. The cloud providers, they are only 29% penetrated today in the IT sector. So if you look at the enterprise market, it's only about 29-30% is on the cloud, 70% still remains. But there is a pie there. AI models, are AI modelers really making money? Stability Diffusion is just making its models open source. Meta is just releasing models by the dozen. They don't see clearly a way for AI models to make money yet. So whether AI modeling companies will really make money, God knows. I mean, it doesn't look very promising yet. AI applications do, in my mind. AI applications definitely have a player. The question is data the moat for them? Do they have some proprietary data that they can really, and companies are beginning to make very interesting moves. There is a metal company which is into nickel and chromium, and what it's really doing is that it's making these partnerships with companies in the same space, but the goal is really to acquire their data. So there are these shifts which are playing out. It's very hard to speculate what that might be. My feeling is application space is definitely promising. There is a trend in that direction. The compellingness of that application matters, what is driving that application matters, and of course the moat of data might be a factor. I see very little chances of building an LLM and making it worthwhile. That seems to be not a very interesting play, right? That kind of a thing is my thought.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yes. Yes, please.
Okay. So it's not very clear to me how startups can use this, this new technology. Obviously, they will not have the resources or the time to, feed in the quantum of data required to build an LLM of this kind, right? So they'll be using some existing platform, such as ChatGPT or whatever. The problem now is potentially every startup has access to this ChatGPT, right? Yeah. So there's no moat because it's like, there is a series of experts in multiple areas. So there are experts in poetry, there are experts in programming, there are experts in God knows all other areas, and I can tap them and I can make this available to my clients. But there's no moat, there's no entry barrier, which means for the startup, what I am doing is exactly what the other guy and many other guys can do. So I'm not very clear how startups can leverage what is available here, because they clearly cannot create another LLM.
Sure. So let me just sort of say the same thing that I just said, right? So if you look at the marketplace, there's infrastructure, AI infrastructure, which you can be a partner and play at. You can build your own LLM or try and tap an LLM that's already out there. Both these things are available to every startup, right? So that's obviously true.
Except building an LLM means a huge amount of effort, time, cost.
And that's not interesting. Why would I be building that, right? Why would I want to build an LLM? My game has to be in the application space. I have to find an interesting application or user behavior that I can tap at. So that's the moat. The idea of what specific thing that you are building for could be a very important idea, right? So let's look at Llama released a thing called Llama code. This was released a couple of days ago, maybe less than a few hours ago. I kind of read the paper quickly to try and understand because I was interested in something. You know, the way they built the code, the way they trained it, and I was reading that process, I was like, my God, this is terrifically ingenious. What did they do? They asked Llama non-code model for give us 60,000 interview questions that are coding questions. And so the Llama non-code model came up with 60,000 interview questions related to coding. Then they asked the same model, can you please give me test cases for each of these 60,000 interview questions that I've asked? So the same model came up with 60,000 test cases. Then they ran a small program where they basically looked at these code questions that had come out, the test results that had come out, and they built a pipeline to train that model, that same model, using the data that was generated by that model to build a completely different model called Llama code.
Focused model.
Yeah. Now see, the whole process is terrifically ingenious. It has been available, Llama 1 has been around for so long. What's stopping anybody in this room to really do that? Nothing. It's just the idea, right? Startups obviously have to have some advantage. I mean, they have to think ingeniously. There is a platform shift. The platform shift is dramatic. It is definitely there. The question is, do we have that ingenious idea? I mean, that has to play out. I mean, it's not like it's a guarantee that I can tell, but definitely that's playing out. Yeah? Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. So, please stay, Anurag. It was very interesting, and I think after the first OpenAI and then this, it was really complete meal, I would say, on AI. First understanding from the Microsoft, and then really looking at what could be the edge cases and how we can really use it. So thank you, Anurag, for sharing it. But before we let you go, we would wish to present you a small token of gift from TAI, and thank you for our gift partners. Yes, absolutely. Lenscard, Good Glam Group, Sirona Hygiene, Yukta Media for these wonderful speaker gifts.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, yes.